Good morning, everyone. We had a chance to see the first session today, and we move on now to building infrastructure on the African continent and the partnerships that will emerge from here. In the context of thinking about the relationship between the UAE and Africa or the broader GCC in Africa, we often think about Dubai Inc. or the UAE Inc. And if you think of a few of the corporate brands that go into the continent for the building blocks of trade, tourism, and development ties, you'd have to think Emirates, Etihad, Emaar, Jumeirah in the hotel sector, and that of our next panelist today, and that is DP World. It's gone into 5 countries on the African continent. And you think of the strategy, airlines, hotel development, tourism development, and also port development for logistics and infrastructure. We've also seen Etisalat go quite aggressively into Africa with its investments, and even in the consumer-facing platform, a company like Rack Ceramics, when you go into these hotels that have been on the ground, building such market share, not only in Africa, of course, but around the world. But there is a need at this stage for the basic building blocks of infrastructure. The estimates are a total of nearly $100 billion over the next 5 years, $100 billion over the next 5 years per year, so $500 billion by 2020 at the latest, to sustain growth of 6% or more. But what are the keys going in? Is it going to be a burden only of the private sector? Are we going to see public-private partnerships exist here? The role of sovereign funds in partnership, the African Development Bank, the Islamic Development Bank, and of course the World Bank as well. We have a lot to cover in 30 minutes. 2 quick housekeeping chores here as we get underway. I know some of you have been sending some questions on the iPads that you have on your lap. There's an icon on the upper right-hand side of your screen. Just hit that icon with the question mark. You send the questions, and I promise I have the iPad in my hand, and we'll get to those questions about 15 minutes into our discussion. There will also be a poll question in our session today, looking at the leading investors over the next 10 years onto the continent. I'll ask you to participate in that. And thereafter, this is something for security purposes, there'll be a short break outside of only 15 minutes. So once we finish this session, we'll take a break for 15 minutes. They're going to do a security sweep outside, ask you to come back in, and then we have the session with our heads of state and my colleague, Becky Anderson, at noon time. Let's welcome our guest for the next half hour for our one-on-one session, Sultan Ahmed bin Sulayem, the chairman of DP World, to the stage. Thanks very much. You take the right seat, yeah? There you go. As we say, we are geared for the next wave of technology. We've got screens all over the place. Let's start in a traditional sense with our opportunity to discuss the opportunity in Africa and where we are today. You know, it's interesting because you see a lot of headline investments take place on big properties. But we've gotten to the stage now where infrastructure is particularly important, but not very sexy, if you will. A lot of people don't want to invest in water. They don't think the returns on road networks are very good. You're in the port business. Give us a sense, now that you've gone into 5 countries, once you leave the port, what's the connectivity? Do you find it pretty dreadful, or do you find it improving in the countries that you've gone in so far, Sultan?
Thank you very much. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. First of all, I'm very happy to participate in this important event. We have invested in a few countries in Africa, and Africa for us is a very important market. We look at the growth, and there is no growth both in profit and potential growth of trade like Africa. Infrastructure is one of the most important. The port project is infrastructure by itself, but the port investment is in one area, and most of the time if you deal with cargo that comes in and comes out, sometimes you are almost immune of the rest of the country. But the potential to develop and grow more, of course, is when we have more infrastructure. Roads are very important. Services like communication is very important. In certain countries, we've been there in the beginning, the telephones even don't match our telephones, so there's no roaming. and it was very difficult to operate. Basic things like hotels need to be there so that your visitors, your customers that you encourage will come there.
Okay, we've had this discussion for the last couple of years here at the Africa Summit, and in that 2-year window, we've seen the attention to the continent go up dramatically. Now, one would argue China has had almost a 2-decade head start in going in as a major player. We had the Africa Summit meeting in Washington, which garnered a lot of attention because the U.S. is now putting it on its radar. So, if you will, in the G2 context of the #1 economy in the United States, the #2 economy in China, moving so heavily into the continent, let's have a candid discussion. Where's the opportunity for GCC companies and the sovereign funds in your view, and which economies are you looking at specifically?
Well, let me tell you, if you look at Africa, I think there are certain places in Africa. We look at West Africa. West Africa is very important. And we started in Dakar, for example, and we encourage, and I will say Senegal is one of the most interesting countries, which has a lot of potential, has good governance, and has been encouraging to us. This is our first hand. I'm talking only about ports, but I'm sure there are other fields, like His Excellency Yabani spoke about, agriculture, financial services are crucial in Africa. Infrastructure, investment, roads. Today, I'll give you an example. If you import a car from Tanzania, say from, for example, China or Japan, even a container, if you say the container costs you freight of $2,000 or so, a 20-foot, that container from the port to Uganda will cost $5,000. So there is a lot is paid in addition to the cost, twice almost, just to get. Even that is the same cost of getting a car to Uganda or to Burundi.
So is this part of the corruption or the bureaucracy,
No.
a combination of both?
There are no roads.
No roads.
The roads are not good. Maybe toward the border of Rwanda is good, but when you go from Rwanda to Uganda and continue, the road is not good. They need railroads, they need proper roads. There is a lot of cost associated with export and import
which is holding back growth.
Which is discouraging investment.
This is interesting because it's the infrastructure, the hard infrastructure that's needed is what you're suggesting. But in the category, I'm going to call it soft infrastructure, how do governments need to put out the welcome mat to make it easy for investment to come in? Now, this is soft infrastructure. Are you welcoming in terms of the level of bureaucracy? Do you have partners that you can go in with that you can trust? Give us a sense of the real obstacles to get from here to there in terms of investment.
Well, let me tell you, one of the biggest obstacles is lack of governance, lack of foreign investment protection. Now, many people will say our country has laws. Yes, every country in Africa has laws to protect foreign investment. But the laws existing, are they implementing them? In many places, they don't.
So you see the laws on the books. What the reality is very different is what you're suggesting.
The experience that you have in certain countries make you think, why would I invest? So it is, if you look at investment, it is bad enough to go and get finance to invest in Africa. You need also the laws and regulation to be implemented, to encourage. I believe they should encourage the investors so they trust the investment. In many places, unfortunately, everything goes good until you start making money. And when you start making money, suddenly problem crops. Suddenly things start to go wrong, And there is nothing wrong with making money. Why would I go in the first place to invest? We had, in general, happy occasions in Africa.
Okay, I want to break down a couple of the different countries. You've gone into Algeria, Egypt, Senegal, Mozambique, and Djibouti so far. Your relationship in Djibouti goes back to the year 2000, and it's, in a sense, to use this analogy, the wheels have come off the relationship. Now, you've invested $1.5 billion into the country. It's going to go to arbitration. But What's the lesson learned out of Djibouti? You saw the laws in the books, you built a relationship on the ground, and all of a sudden it's unwound. Is it because of the profits of DP World, the relationship and change of governments? What happens in a situation like this?
I think it is a matter of misunderstanding. It's a major misunderstanding. We, of course, reject all their accusations, which are foundless, and I think anybody who knows what it means to be listed in London or in NASDAQ will know that a company like us cannot afford to do what they're accusing us. But anyway, this case is now in arbitration.
Well, you raise an interesting point, though, if I may follow up, Sultan, is that because you are listed and because you have to be transparent, do you become a target then of governments who want to basically hold you at ransom or put pressure on you because they know you have that public listing pressure, and it makes it difficult for you to operate in some markets?
Well, I will say, first of all, we are working normally in Djibouti. We are in charge of the port. We're running the port. So our operation haven't been affected. At all. Our relation with the government definitely is tarnished, is affected, and I am hoping that will be resolved. I hope the accusations after the arbitration, they will find out that these are foundless, and we'll go back in a happy relation. But the sad thing is that why would a government encourage such accusation to reach this level when you have a track record of a country that invested something that is maybe 12 to 15% of their GNP today? Because we didn't just invest, DP World did not just invest, DP World invested in the port, in the oil terminal, but the government of Dubai invested in a hotel, invested in roads, invested in the free zone. So in total, it's a major investment.
So the port alone represents 12% of GDP.
So the operation that we have is almost 12 to 15% of GDP.
And if people look at the strategic nature of the Djibouti port, it is a funnel into Ethiopia. This is a market of nearly 100 million consumers. Actually, so it's vital to keep it open.
Actually, when we looked at Djibouti, there was no feasible study that shows us it was going to make money. We went in there when everything was on red. But what we did in Djibouti is, because of our network of ports, because of our relation that date many years with our customers, we managed to convince them that if you want to go to Ethiopia, this is the best location. And we will make it happen. So we started in the old port, and we went into the new port, which was a dream. Nobody believed that that port was going to work.
Wow.
But we did believe in it, and we turned it around.
It's interesting. Let's use the Senegal example. Now, this is where politics come into play. Operating in Dakar, a relationship's been built up. Because you're making money, it goes onto the radar of those domestically, becomes a news item. The government seizes your port operations for 6 months, and then the president intervened and suggested there was no corruption and we can transfer back. But that's not an easy process to go through. But you're happy what you're coming out with in Senegal. Explain why.
Let me tell you, we have a very happy relation in Senegal. Senegal has a democratic transition of government. So a new president was elected. I went to see him and I congratulated him. The problem happened. They were investigating some irregularities in the previous government. And of course, they looked at the port. They were actually more interested in the airport of what happened to it, and they interested in the port. Suddenly, we received a letter from the parliament that there is an administrator who's going to take over and seize our operation and basically control it. And I was surprised, and I managed to meet the president in Paris. And I must tell you, I am very impressed and grateful for the justice in Senegal, that the president saw the letter. He was surprised himself. He spoke to the Minister of Justice. He told me, listen, there is a process. I told him, we don't have anything to hide. He said, you are running the port as usual. We will be investigating. I said, you have all the time to investigate. It took them 6 months, and they came out and they said, we have nothing, and we withdraw all this. This is good, because during that, a lot of our people said, oh, this is the way Africa is. This is the way the new government is going to take your business. It didn't happen. I never believed that. And Senegal demonstrated to us that it is a trustworthy country. That's a country you can invest. and you can invest more. We're looking even at the free zone, developing a free zone today in Senegal, and we're looking at location, either the old airport location or maybe near the new airport location.
Okay, so this experience that you had in Senegal and the experience in Djibouti, 5 countries that you've decided to go into on a vast continent of more than 50 countries, you're not finished. What are you looking at today?
Let me tell you, today we spoke a little bit, His Excellency spoke about Nigeria. Nigeria is an amazing place, and we'd love to find an opportunity in Nigeria. Lagos is, as you just heard, shipping line will wait 2 months. We never found opportunity. Lagos is too busy. They have plans to build new ports, but those plans are still plans. They haven't decided even on a location. And so if we find a location in Lagos, we'll go tomorrow. We know what we want to do. We know how to do it, and we have the customers. We are looking at other countries in Africa. I am not at liberty to speak because many of them are at a late stage of negotiations. So confidentiality and discussion is important.
So there's more to come.
Definitely more to come. We are very bullish about Africa, and we are not discouraged about what happened in Djibouti. It makes us open our eyes better. It makes us maybe handle things better in the future. We learn. These are maybe some hiccups, and I am sure the relation in Djibouti will go back to normal. I am positive about that. I believe it is a misunderstanding that eventually, once the dust
it can't be cleared up.
go away, people will realize that what did Dubai do to Djibouti is a good thing.
Okay, we have some questions on the audience survey here on the iPad. One of the things, this is a very good question from an anonymous input. What are the 3 tips on what not to do that Dubai would give to Africa? Not about investing in Africa. What are 3 tips on what not to do that Dubai would give to Africa? Looking back at the 20-year model of Dubai and the development of infrastructure, what are 3 things that you shouldn't do in this path to development over the next 20 years? Which mistakes have we learned about perhaps over-exuberance, the right infrastructure, thinking through the different building blocks? What would you say in your experience?
I would say one thing. Never listen to the consultants. I'll give you an example. I'll give you an example.
I met a few consultants today.
No,
I'm sure they're going to run for the exit here, but or they're going to tackle you after the session.
Let me tell you, His Highness Sheikh Ahmed, remember, in the early 90s, the government was contemplating at expanding the airport. And at that time, let me go back a little bit. You see, Dubai, Jebel Ali Free Zone or Jebel Ali Port, government was advised not to build it. It's too big for Dubai. Dubai doesn't need it. When I started working in Jebel Ali, my boss told me, I have good news and bad news. Good news, you have a job. Bad news is Jebel Ali. And I said, why is that? He said, this place will never work. I wish they reclaim it back instead of dredging it. It will never work. I never believed I will see in my life that we need to expand Jebel Ali. Today, we have no space. We are dredging. We are actually reclaiming. But go back to the airport. When the airline decided to fly to the Far East from Europe directly, during a meeting with His Highness Sheikh Ahmed and Sheikh Mohammed, I think His Highness Sheikh Ahmed told us that Sheikh Mohammed said, do you mean the airlines are going to fly over Dubai and they are not going to land in Dubai? They said yes, because they need refueling. Sheikh Mohammed and Sheikh Ahmed told me, he said, he did like this, you mean, what can we do to bring people to Dubai from these people flying over us? And he said, well, we need to build things for people to enjoy in Dubai. Now, what is that? So Sheikh Ahmed and Emirates Airline did a study. What does Dubai need? One of them is more beachfront properties. One of them is entertainment. More hotels. A lot of things that came out of the Emirates Airline study that actually, when we did Nakhil, we used it.
Ah, right.
Now, I will
so you're suggesting you have to think about every step of the economy. So it's entertainment, tourism, connectivity, and business in terms of transport.
But let me tell you about the airport. So I wasn't there, but I heard that the consultants cautioned Sheikh Mohammed about the airport. They said, if you expand the airport, remember there was an airport very famous in the past, which was Shannon, Ireland. Shannon was one of the most important airports because no airline could cross the Atlantic, so they have to refuel in Shannon. When the airline flew directly and landed in Europe without Shannon, Shannon disappeared, which is true. So they're telling him, implying that don't develop Dubai airport because the same thing like Shannon would happen to you. Now that is a classic, real example. What did Sheikh Mohammed do? Did he listen? He didn't listen. He expanded the airport. He put the facilities. In fact, the traders in Dubai are traders and merchants, and they never invest in something that will give them money in many years. So the government invested in hotels, with Jumeirah Beach Hotel, with Burj Al Arab. These are the first hotels that government wanted to invest because nobody wanted to invest in hotels. Later on, the trader realized that hotel business is something that makes money.
This raises a good point about the opportunities, for example, that are available today. Well, what is the role, quickly, because we only have 7 minutes and I want to get to the poll question, but what is the role of government to get the initial seed capital in with perhaps the Islamic Development Bank or the African Development Bank? Is that necessary to look and say, we need to give some incentive coming in? What are the right incentives to encourage investment?
Let me tell you, in a port, we would love to go into a brown field. We don't want to go in a green field. We did that in Djibouti. We went to the brown field, which is the old port, and we went to the big port later on, because the investment initially in a green field is very expensive. In the best situation, usually government will build the port. So you don't need it to come to build it or build the infrastructure. So we're not asking that. We could build the port. But the roads, I believe they should try to link. I believe a link between Tanzania, Kenya, toward Burundi, passing by South Sudan and Uganda is crucial, very important. I believe certain landlocked countries today are suffering.
They need to have that infrastructure.
They need to have the infrastructure. The roads are very important. And they need to build railroads. These infrastructures are crucial. We are looking today at dry ports in certain countries, like Mali, like Rwanda, like Ethiopia, because one way is to put the cargo in one area, and maybe that way it will be easier and cheaper. But definitely, if there is a road, it will be, the road will build cities.
It needs the artery around. In fact, there's a question from the floor. There are opportunities in Tanzania. How do you link up with DP? And I wanted to add a second layer to that question. You know, there's a gas boom taking place in the East African basin. I mean, there's a lot of potential here. Do you think it'll be managed well? Mozambique, Tanzania, there's a lot of natural gas offshore. Are you confident this will work well?
Let me tell you, we have been in Mozambique for 7 years now. One of the happiest experiences we have in Africa. Government encouraged us. We have never had an occasion where they interfered in our business. Every time they come in, they said, what can we do more? I have a great respect to the President of Mozambique, a great respect to the government. Maputo today is a big port, has greater opportunities because today we are supplying Durban in South Africa, we are supplying Zimbabwe. Many countries around Mozambique are depending on it. Mozambique is going through a lot of transformation. I believe the gas is going to be a blessing because this country has one of the most beautiful beaches on the world. Between Tanzania to South Africa, that's all Mozambique.
Interesting. Okay, let's bring up our poll question, and we're going to find out, Mr. Bin Sulayman, who's perhaps going to lead. What's the audience think about who's going to lead going forward in the future? If we can bring that question up, and I'll read it off the screen as well as in my hands here. It's the poll question, if you can get your iPads ready. By 2025, and you guys can vote on it here, I don't have it up on my screen, but the polling question is, by 2025, which region do you expect to emerge as the largest investor in African infrastructure? By 2025, which region do you expect to emerge as the largest investor in African infrastructure, not in general? Other African countries themselves, which has been the case so far, the UAE and the Gulf or the GCC, China, India, the United States, and we talked about that African summit recently, or Europe. Europe's been really kind of shut out because of Emirates, Etihad, and Qatar Airways setting up the new links now going in. We'll talk about the results as they come in here. But by 2025, the #1 investment region into infrastructure. We'll wait for that to come up. Before we get the answers, what are your thoughts? Who's going to lead the way in infrastructure investment in your view?
In Africa?
Yeah.
In my opinion, China.
China, still.
Because China have major investment today in mining, and China needs the raw materials. And one example, for example, they are financing the rail link, 1,000 kilometers between Djibouti and Addis Ababa.
Let's see what our audience had to say here. Wow. So they tend to agree with you on that. Let me take a closer look. 63% say it's going to be China, right? 14% think it could be the UAE and the Gulf states, probably with the help of the sovereign funds going forward. 9% is India. A lot of people overlook the Indian trade relationships, particularly in sub-Saharan East Africa, which is there. And 8% other African countries. So far, by the way, for the audience, if you haven't seen the Dubai Chamber EIU study, it's mainly African countries with the help of African banks. But China is scoring very high, and the United States at just 3%.
Yes.
It shows that the U.S. is well behind the curve here.
Yes, China has a big appetite for two reasons. First of all, they need the raw materials. Second, they use their companies, Chinese companies. They manufacture the rail, they manufacture the trains, and basically they build it. There is also a link which is between Lamu in Kenya all the way to Juba. And that's also interesting because this is basically between two countries.
Great. We have just about a minute and a half left. I wanted to go back to the story because I don't know if you remember, but in 1990 I was here covering the Gulf War, and I got a call from your office to come out to Jebel Ali. In 1990, there wasn't much in Jebel Ali, but you had a big blueprint on the table saying that you're going to build this big deep water port in the next few years, and I looked a little bit skeptical at you because I didn't think it was going to happen. For those governments that are sitting in the audience today or private sector investments, when there's that much resistance or that much skepticism to a project, what do you have to tell people about believing in the blueprint? Because I know you worked with Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid on that project.
Let me tell you, I think I might need more than a minute and a half. This is interesting because in the early 90s, we had a plan to deepen the port. The port is 14.5 meters, we need 17. We did a study, it would have cost us $200 million. We did a feasibility study, and the feasibility said it's not feasible because the shipping line will not bring the big vessel to Dubai. They'll bring it to Salalah and Aden. So we did a market research, and I contacted personally each shipping line, and they all said, we're not going to come. So I mentioned to Sheikh Mohammed, I told him, remember this big project? He said, yes. I said, well, it's not going to happen because the feasibility is wrong. The big shipping line will not bring the cargo to Dubai. He said to me, how can you sell something you don't have? And I said, well, it's $200 million. Even if I go to borrow from the banks, they will not lend us money. They will not lend us based on the feasibility. And so we went back home to Jebel Ali, and I remember we stayed till midnight trying to think. And finally, we came up with an idea. We said, let's test it. How much is it going to cost to do 300 meters, 600 meters of berth? And that time it was going to cost $5 million. So anyway, we dredged a small pocket in the port, 600 meters, for $5 million. We told all the shipping line, we have a deep water, 17 meters. You can only come in high tide. Low tide, you'll be stranded. So they told us, interesting, but we're not interested. 2 weeks later, there was a storm in Salalah, and one vessel had to come to us. Then started to come regular. Another shipping line, MSC, said, we need to give you a service every 2 weeks. So the experience made, the experiment made this feasibility, challenge the feasibility, and that made it possible. With that, we were encouraged, and immediately we dredged the port. And today, whatever the shipping line told us, whatever the consultant told us, no big ship will come to Dubai. The reality is all the ships are coming to Dubai. Had we listened to the consultants. Dubai, Jebel Ali would have remained a very small port if we listened. So nothing in this world, fixed. You have to take chances, calculated risks, but you have to move on.
Good.
You cannot wait. You cannot believe. I mean, if the consultants are right, why would they still be consultants? They'll be doing their business.
Okay, on that note, thanks for sharing the story. Just a reminder, it's a 15-minute break, so get a coffee quickly, come back in. There's a security sweep, and my colleague Becky Anderson and the African leaders will be next. A nice round of applause to Sultan bin Sulaim. Nice to see you.